Hello everybody, today I'm going to be discussing a lot of the lore that happens before Destiny 1. And I'm doing that because Destiny has some of the worst storytelling I've ever seen. But Destiny is a game that I can say has some of the best lore in any game, and it's truly rich with so many different stories. So I'm going to be going over a lot of the stories that I think are necessary to understanding to what's kind of happening throughout the game that they don't really tell you about until later, into like Destiny 2. So today I'm going to teach you about what I understand about the story. So grab a granola bar or something. It shouldn't be too long, no more than 10 minutes. Before I start, I should preface by saying that things in the Destiny universe like light and darkness are actually like forces and have power to each of them, but neither are truly good or evil. They just kind of are. That may get confusing with some of the things I'm about to say, but just trust me, the actual forces, just like the dark side and the light side, are both like neither are truly evil, but they are used by either good or evil people. So in the Destiny universe, Earth sends a person to Mars around 2014 and finds a huge floating orb of the sky and decides to name it the Traveler. The Traveler ends up ushering in a huge golden age for humanity, and this results in huge technological advances and interstellar colonization on planets such as Mars. The Traveler never truly spoke either. Instead, it gave visions to those in humanity it deemed as its speakers. Eventually, through the tech of the most advanced computers we've ever known, which are called the War Minds, people found new bodies and robots that they called exos. These perfect bodies, however, confused the mind due to them not having any flaws or anything the mind can comprehend. So the bodies had to be wiped multiple times, therefore giving characters such as Cade with a number 6 after him, meaning that his mind has been wiped 6 times. Just a preface, so in case you hear me say like any of those names followed by a number, that's what I mean. Humanity prospered for many years until the reason the Traveler showed up in the system reared its ugly polygonal shaped face. These were called the Pyramids, which humanity straight up just called the Darkness, but we would learn that's not exactly true. But these Pyramids, the fleet, brought in what we know as the Collapse and destroyed everything that humanity had made and everything before. This was stopped by the Traveler's last action as a giant flash of light pushed the Darkness back out of the system before it seemingly goes dormant. The Traveler went dormant above the last city and sent out a bunch of little machines called the Ghost. These machines each had their own personality and the ability to bring back the dead with the power of the light. It is important to note that light directly from the Traveler is only able to create life. The Traveler vanishing, though, would start what is known as the Dark Ages. Before I go any further, real quick too, anybody that is resurrected by the Traveler does not remember anything. They instead can wield the light as weapons. And I know I said that pure light can only be used to create, but they wielded different versions, those being solar, arc, and void. Solar being very akin to fire, arc being very akin to electricity, and void being very akin to black holes and singularities. Void was also the element that was almost the closest to what darkness would end up being used for. Over the next hundreds of years, these beings would be called Risen, and they became a variety of things, both good and bad. The Ghosts never liked seeing their Risen become evil or bad, but most Ghosts would stick with them, hoping that they would eventually pull themselves out and become good again. But this allowed these beings to have power and stay as things called warlords, where they would rule over massive areas and slay beings such as Ahamkaras, which are a very limited few of wish-granting dragons, and they would hunt them into extinction. They would keep their remains as trophies, but they would eventually figure out their remains would also grant wishes, which some warlords would still keep just to abuse the wishes, which they wouldn't know would have consequences every time they asked. Eventually, to stoop up to their evil and their tyranny, the Iron Lords were formed, and these were more of like the people's heroes, and the Iron Lords would step up to combat the warlords. After a certain amount of time, though, the Risen would eventually fall into 3 different classes. These were Titans, Hunters, and Warlocks. Titans were the very Spartan-akin heroes of the city that were very traditional soldiers, and they were defenders. Hunters were these gunslinging stealthy monks that always lived their life to the limits and didn't want anyone holding them back and never wanted to stay at one place. Warlocks always sought the meaning in everything and wanted to control the fundamentals of each element. They sought through their own intellect the power that they needed to destroy enemies. Each of these classes would also choose vanguards for each class, and the first that was deemed was Saint 14 for the Titans, Osiris for the Warlocks, and Andal Brask for the Hunters. Eventually, a race of aliens would come to Earth that had also been blessed by the Traveler a long time ago and had their own dark age called the Whirlwind, and they decided to come here and try and take the Traveler back. We called them the Fallen, but we learned their real name was the Elixir many years later. This led to them making many different groups within themselves called houses, and they grew in power very quickly and took over most of Earth. They eventually pushed to the last city's walls and had a massive battle known as the Battle of Twilight Gap. Many Titans tried to hold the wall but eventually fell and had most of their armor turned into a ceremonious rocket launcher called the Gallarhorn. Or Yallarhorn? I don't know how that's pronounced. Saint 14 himself took out nearly all of the fallen house leaders before noticing that Osiris had disappeared. Osiris had already been working on something on Mercury called the Infinite Force, which is a simulation machine that seemingly granted different timelines, and it mainly was used by what an enemy race called the Vex. The Vex were a being of robots that came from the future and just aren't like limited to one timeline. We see like past versions of themselves show up, but after noticing that Osiris had disappeared, Saint 14 decided to try and follow him into this gateway. This sadly would lead to Saint 14 never being found and being lost to time, and Osiris feeling an immense amount of guilt for his friend disappearing. The Iron Lords during this time, however, knew they needed some sort of advantage to fight against either the Fallen or any enemies that were coming, and they needed a way to bring humanity back. And Rasputin, the Warmind, knew that the Iron Lords had just recently taken in one of his creations as what we now know as Guardians due to them defending the last city. So not only had the Iron Lords taken one of his supposed children, but now they were asking something of him. And Rasputin decided to pull a very devious plan on them. He decided to lead the Iron Lords to a supposed Golden Age cache of a revolutionary nanite called Siva. Siva was used during the Golden Age to build buildings and cities within minutes or hours. Rasputin didn't tell them that when they got to its replication chamber, he would try to lock them within the chamber and force Siva to destroy all of them inside. The Guardians decided that they were going to try and fight back, but it was no use. The Guardians were already thought to be immortal as long as their ghosts had time to revive them. Even then, nothing could really destroy the ghost, but they were wrong. Siva took over their armor, weapons, and bodies and made them slaughter each other with their own light, and then forced one of the only people that wasn't infected to seal them all within the chamber and decide to blow them up. His name was Lord Saladin. He felt immense guilt and retreated to the Iron Lord's base on Fellwinter's Peak to never be seen for a very long time. After this, the Hunter Vanguard would die to a fallen house leader and hand his role off to K-6. Another Titan, Zavala, would eventually take over the spot that Saint 14 left, and Osiris, after feeling immense guilt, would try and train a new student named Ikora to become the next Vanguard for the Warlocks. Many years later, a ghost would be roaming outside of an old evacuation zone in old Russia before finding the body of an old soldier that tried to defend the people as they tried to evacuate. They would choose this person to resurrect and begin their journey into this new world to find their destiny. This person was you. Hope you all enjoyed that. I think I got it right around 10 minutes, but I hope you all have an absolutely amazing one. Hope you all enjoy. Peace.